If you're looking at discovering the power of Mac at scale with a new insightful podcast, well, We Got Your Mac enables you to join IT and business leaders as they delve into the benefits and considerations of adopting Apple Mac's platform in your organisation. So if you're looking to gain the knowledge and confidence you need to make more informed decisions, tune into their guest expert episodes released every 2 weeks. Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast, where every day we attempt to demystify complex technologies and make them accessible for everyone. And I'm your host, Neil C. Hughes, and today we're going to be tackling a topic at the forefront of every organisation's agenda: cybersecurity. Because with me today is Peter Dyson from a company called Kovrr, spelled Kovrr. They're a leader in cyber risk quantification. But what does that mean? Well, we'll find out today, because in light of new SEC regulations mandating reporting of cybersecurity incidents, we're diving into what it means for businesses, and also shed light on how Kovrr's innovative approaches are helping customers translate those technical cyber risks into understandable financial terms, which is a crucial factor for board-level discussions. So whether you are a cybersecurity expert or a business leader attempting to navigate these new regulatory waters, this episode will be packed with insights you won't want to miss. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to the UK, where Peter is waiting to dive into the world of cybersecurity risk management. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm Peter Dyson. I'm the head of analytics at Kovrr, who are a cyber risk modelling company. My background is really, I started out as an engineer modelling fluid dynamics, and I've transitioned through 15 years of risk analytics and capital modelling into cybersecurity.
Fantastic. Well, there's so much we've got to talk about today, because earlier this year, and I say that we're recording this still in 2023, the SEC issued new cybersecurity rules that mandated greater transparency and risk communication. Now, we normally think of cyber incidents as a security matter, but can you give me a bit of a high-level analysis on how this ruling makes cybersecurity more of a boardroom and critical business issue?
Sure thing. So it all started with a statement from the Securities and Exchange Commission in the US, where they did a study that revealed about 83% of companies that they manage suffer from multiple data breaches in the last year, with the average cost of about $9.5 million US, which is quite a dramatic increase of about 600% over the last 10 years. So the big increase seems to have been a big shift towards the online sort of resources during COVID-19. And the legislation's there really to promote more robust cybersecurity and risk management practices among corporations, to start to increase accountability among boards. And this rapid growth in cyber risk has kind of got it to a point where it is affecting the economy. So the regulatory bodies have started to feel the need to step in, and certainly the SEC has been the first. And what it does is really require the reporting of material cyber events, but also starting to get boards to manage their underlying risk frameworks about and report to the SEC how they manage cyber risk and how they identify material incidents that have happened to the company. So it's certainly important in terms of the senior management team and boards, because firstly, they're required to do it, but it's also an increasing way of establishing good practice and getting a good understanding of the level of risk and response you might expect and want to see in a business. And while cyber risk is still a business risk with a very technical hazard, it can impact quite a wide variety of critical business operations, anything from payments to production. And companies really need to be treating it as a business risk and having those senior level conversations.
And it really feels like cybersecurity has entered the mainstream in recent weeks. So yesterday, the government was announcing over here in the UK that a cybersecurity attack could cripple the entire nation. On Netflix, many will be chilling out over the Christmas period, watching the Julia Roberts movie, Leave the World Behind, also about cybersecurity. And with When you take all of that, all these big news stories with the new mandate from SEC, how is cybersecurity and planning for risk now very much a financial impact type of conversation versus previously being siloed in those realms of security? And I suppose as well, did the boardroom get it now? I appreciate I've thrown about 8 questions at you there, but what are you saying?
Yeah, so it's quite difficult because cybersecurity is quite a technical field, and you can get into the technical detail really, really quickly. And I guess the board's attention is slightly different.
Yeah.
So, but cyber itself can contain quite a significant level of risk, and it's grown very rapidly over the last couple of years compared to other business risks. So there's a growing need for the technical people in the organization to be able to communicate that to management and the board that maybe don't understand the technical details behind actually what's going on. But they need to understand it as a risk and how it compares against other risks in the business when they're seeing liquidity or supply chain risks. How big a problem is it compared to other things that they're worried about? And then what do you do in terms of a cost-effective mitigation strategy? How much should you spend on cyber and reducing it as a risk? So these are all kind of fairly critical questions that the board and management need to understand to be able to put in place something sensible that's proportionate to the level of risk. And we found that certainly communicating the level of risk in cyber in terms of highs, mediums, or lows, or proxy factors, or things that don't really have a sort of tangible answer to things. It wasn't really answering the questions being asked by boards. You might say, yes, it's high cyber risk, but that doesn't really mean anything compared to anything else. So if you phrase it in financial terms, such as, say, there's a 1 in 10 probability of losing $100 million, then it starts to be a much clearer discussion around, can the company fund it when it happens? What's going to happen in the 1 in 10 chance? Is that going to ruin the company, or is it going to annoy the shareholders, or is it going to be okay? What's the acceptable level to lose? Where are you compared to that acceptable level, and what can you do about it? So turning it into a financial conversation yields a much more productive resource in terms of getting funding for cyber mitigations and risk mitigation things that you want to do to control cyber, but also communicating the risk to the business to help CFOs and other execs plan for what happens when some of these risks materialize.
And one of the reasons I invited you on the podcast today is after I was reading your team at Kovrr recently published the Fortune 1000 Cyber Risk Report, and in that you determine SEC materiality with marketplace benchmarks and ultimately try to provide companies with objective benchmarks of incident materiality. Now, in a language that everyone can understand, because it is a complex issue, can you just expand on what leaders within Fortune 1000 companies and even mid-sized enterprises, what do they need to know about incident materiality and how it might impact their business next year?
Sure. So you're a company trying to understand how big your or how likely it is for you to experience a cyber incident. It can be quite a challenging operation. There's a lot of information out there, but a lot of it's contradictory or about specific sectors in the market, and it's quite difficult to get a rounded view of one particular company. So even if you've done a quantification and you're trying to support it to your senior leadership, building confidence in that can be quite challenging because there's a lot of technical detail to unpick once you start getting into the details. And it's not a very transparent or to a non-technical audience. So what we tried to do with the report was to pull together a market benchmark where companies compare themselves to, firstly, the benchmark, but also compare how the risk changes across different industries and different revenue bands and sort of sizes of companies, to give a sort of estimate in terms of the probability of different types of event, like data breach or ransomware or interruptions, and estimate the level of cost to the business when these sort of big entities happen, and kind of communicate the big levers about what's going to drive the change for a particular organization. So the benchmark certainly has been built up by doing a lot of modeling from the external view of a company. So we've taken the Fortune 1000 as a sort of well understood benchmark of companies. We run a sort of simplified version of our quantification model using the latest intelligence on breach activity. And it really gives a rounded view about how different industries perform against each other, and really there to help firms like understand what their potential exposure is if you're in that sort of population, or how the relationship might then extrapolate to your organization, and what the main drivers are that you might give you a bit of experience. And we found that certainly boards, when they're presented with some of this information, even a very well done quantification, they want something to compare it to know if you're in the right ballpark, if they can support the numbers or not. So, and none of those benchmarks seem to exist. So we're trying to build up this picture to help people validate their own materiality and understand how they can support or challenge some of the information that's being presented.
And for anyone that's not seen that report, what were some of the most standout findings, especially within your experience of working with Fortune 1000 companies too?
One of the more interesting findings was when we started to group the Fortune 1000 by the sort of size and the revenue bands that we put them in. There's quite a dependency of size of the organization. So if you were to plot a chart with the number of expected breaches per year against the revenue of different organizations, you'd see, as you might expect, that as the company gets bigger, the environment gets more complex and broader, the attack surface widens, and the number of attacks increases, as you might expect. But we see quite a pronounced effect of like economies of scale of cyber defenses. So if you were to take that frequency and divide it maybe by the production in terms of like the $1 million of revenue to try and get the frequency per unit of production across the population, then we see quite a economy of scale, if you like, from the size of the organization. So if you plot that as a chart, as the organizations get bigger, they get better at defending themselves per unit of production. So there's this scale effect to cyber defense, and obviously only one of those breaches could potentially cause significant loss, but it's quite interesting to see how the different dynamics start to unfold for larger organizations across these different populations.
And I'm curious, what are the top industries impacted based on your research? Is it affecting some more than others?
Yeah, so it depends what you mean by top. I suppose it's the what we've seen is some different dynamics across different sectors. So, for example, finance and real estate companies, we see, and including insurance, we see a relatively low frequency of events, as you might expect with high levels of regulation and security governance, which sort of drive down the frequency. But they've also got a high exposure to things like financial information and personally identifiable information as well, which increases the severity when a breach does happen. And if you look at the opposite side of that, things like mining and oil and gas companies and manufacturing, we see the severity is quite often much lower, but the frequency is much higher. So oil and gas and manufacturing have got a lot of exposure to operational technology, such as connected machinery and sort of controllers, which can be quite exposed to interruption events. And when there's things like safety concerns and the risk of physical damage as a result of a cyber attack, they're more likely to shut things down for maybe more minor events. So we see the response frequency, kind of the probability of these events impacting the business goes up, but the actual the cost to the business is much lower. So there's these different dynamics that happen across these different sectors that drive different responses. So it's quite interesting to see those expand in some of this reporting.
And something I try and do on this podcast every day is demystify some of the terms that people in business may hear. And one that I recently came across, cyber risk quantification, or CRQ. So can you tell me a little bit more about that and how the solution, and which is a solution your company provides as they plan for risk? So can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so this is trying to, I guess, bridge the gap between the technical and the sort of board level financial discussions. So, Kovrr provides a platform, or financial risk quantification in general is about trying to map out like a virtual representation of your company and all the digital infrastructure that it contains and how it's connected, what the attack surface looks like, and overlaying scenarios of risk and scenarios of different breaches to see how controls respond, to see how the business responds in terms of restoring backups and which sectors in the business are going to be impacted and for how long, and what data is exposed to different types of threat actors and patterns of events. So it's really trying to map out that kind of representation, try a large number of scenarios and see how much they're likely to cost the organization. And that's really helpful in terms of getting the output, in terms of, as I said before, in terms of probabilities and costs, to help with risk planning and mitigation, and then trying to drive the investment, if you like, to reduce and control this risk in a proportionate way. And cyber risk quantification, or CRQ, is really a sort of leaders and sort of senior stakeholders tool to sort of identify which risks within cyber even have the most significant potential to generate material loss at the business, and then help them target security projects which yield the biggest return on investment to really improve the risk and drive down the frequency or the severity based on common control frameworks like CIS or NIST, or there's ISO as well. And overall, we have to respect the fact that the security team's got a limited budget, limited manpower, and CRQ allows for the sort of allocation of those resources in the most efficient way to limit damage and get buy-in from senior stakeholders doing the right thing. And I suppose one final point on that is we're in an environment, certainly at the moment, where it's increasingly difficult to get cyber cover if you want cyber insurance. And the level of cover that companies want can be quite challenging to get. So a financial risk quantification can help understand in greater detail the value you get from transferring the risk to an insurer, and what you might be able to do instead of that in terms of mitigations to achieve a similar level of risk appetite or risk capital.
So as we come full circle, in your view, does the recent SEC findings escalate cybersecurity risk to a new level, as one where both the CFO and the CEO are now involved, or at least make them more financially aware of the impact of an incident? And why is it better for businesses navigating in this increasingly dangerous world of cybersecurity crime? Because as I said a few moments ago, we got this new movie on Netflix. The government are talking about it. It feels like it's entered the narrative finally, and that probably delights and frustrates you in equal measure.
Well, it's good. It's nice to know that the SEC are on brand and keeping up with regular trends. It's nice that they're watching Netflix as well. But it's come at a good time where obviously security risk is on a lot of minds already. So, and it does help to frame and formalize thinking around security risk. And yes, it's a regulatory requirement, but also it's a good way of, even if you're not monitored by the SEC, to see what's going on and to understand maybe a bit of the thinking of how other people are approaching these types of problems. So it's an interesting time to bring this out when there's going to be a lot of discussion about it and what people are doing, and hopefully a bit of greater transparency. So, and more importantly, I suppose where cyber may have been wrapped up as an operational risk in the past, as a thing that might happen to the business, is more and more being pulled out of the standalone risk category, because it's quite a important issue in its own right. And people like your CFO probably need to know that there's a 1 in 10 chance, for example, of losing, as I said before, 10 million or 100 million, so that they can plan risk capital, they can plan liquidity, and what this means for the potential solvency for the business. If that's exceeding the amount of resources on your balance sheet, you probably need to know and do something about it. And plan, do we need more controls, or would that investment be better spent on other risk categories? For example, it might be that cyber is under control. But knowing that is a really helpful kind of discussion to have at that CFO, CEO level, to say, is it a problem? If it is a problem, let's do something about it. If it's not a problem, let's focus on something else. So if you're not having those discussions at the moment, it's probably a good time to start and watch how things are unfolding with the SEC and companies and the resources that are being generated to help companies deal with that. It's a good time to jump on and work out what's going on in the world and protect your data and assets.
And will you be spoiling your family Christmas by shouting at the screen while watching that Netflix movie? Stop getting cybersecurity wrong, like Adam Partridge almost, because tech gets wrong in so many TV series and films. There was a great line in, I think it was CSI, about a decade ago, and the line I will never forget. And a lady said, "I'll create a GUI interface in Visual Basic to see if I can track an IP address." So, do you get frustrated watching that stuff?
I mean, it's very, very much of the time, isn't it? It's of the time and a Hollywood understanding of what's going on in the world, which is always it's always entertaining to see to see the perceptions of some of this stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. So for everyone listening, what is the one tip you have for a business leader that's maybe starting to plan for 2024? Reading your report, doing a little research over the holiday season. Any advice that you would offer anyone?
I think it's really around understanding your cyber risk. Like understand the risk to the organization, the risk capital that it might implement, and the cost of capital and how to reduce it in a targeted way. Obviously, using cyber risk quantification is a good way of doing that. But yeah, plan the risk, understand it first, and then plan what you're going to do about it.
Awesome. And as we enter a new year, there will be an increasing pressure on everyone to be once again in a state of continuous learning. So before I let you go, where or how will you be self-educating in 2024?
So I quite like to break my learning down into like separate channels for information and skills, I suppose. So information is probably around getting the latest detail on what's going on in the world, where I think like podcasts are a great resource, obviously, to you can listen on the go and keep up to date, and things like web platforms like Medium, and I'm probably a bit old school to use RSS feeds, but they're quite helpful to aggregate things in the right place. But like recent information is quite a good channel to pull things together. And then skills in terms of like longer term upskilling myself. I'm a very practical learner, so I like to go back to my engineering roots. I like to give things a go, probably getting an idea for a new analysis or something and trying to do it in a different way, or try different platforms or tools, and then just Googling or to find solutions, or articles and books are very good. So just in general, never stop learning or keep trying new things.
Yeah, 100% with you. And on the RSS feed as well, I still use Feedly to keep up to scan through things. We forgot, man. The kids today don't understand RSS feeds. What's going on?
No. There's no good way of aggregating like lots of news feeds into one place without RSS, but nobody does support it anymore.
Yeah. Oh, well, before I let you go, for anyone listening, just wanting to find out more information about anything we talked about today, maybe they want to check out that report that you did at Kovrr too. Where would you like to point everyone listening?
So the report itself is on our website, kovrr.com, kovrr.com, or they can find me or any of my colleagues on LinkedIn. It's probably the best place to find us.
Fantastic. Well, I'll add those links to the show notes so people can find you nice and easy. I wish you a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year. Hope you don't get too triggered watching Netflix over the holiday season, but thank you so much for sharing your story and the great work you're doing. Thanks again.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot.
So a big thank you to Peter for joining us today and exploring the evolving landscape of cybersecurity and the implications of the new SEC regulations. And for me, I think it was a real eye-opener on the importance of understanding and managing cyber risks in financial terms, especially at the boardroom level. I think his insights highlighted the critical role of continuous learning and adapting to the fast-paced world of cybersecurity management. But as always, anything you'd like to add to the conversation, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, @NeilCHughes. Just send me a quick message and we'll keep this conversation going. But thank you for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.